The dust settled on the parched streets of Willow Creek as Savannah Vale stepped off the stagecoach, her heart pounding with the desperate rhythm of someone running from a past that refused to stay buried. The frontier town of 1875 Arizona Territory sprawled before her like an uncertain promise, ramshackle buildings baking under the merciless sun, weathered faces turning to appraise the newcomer in their midst. Her gloved hands trembled as she clutched her single valise, wondering if she'd made the gravest mistake of her 22 years. "Miss, your trunk," the stagecoach driver called, already hauling down the weathered leather case that contained everything she'd managed to salvage from her former life. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the din of horses, wagons, and the cacophony of frontier life that assaulted her ears. She fumbled in her reticule for a coin, painfully aware of how few remained. The blazing sun beat down on her impractical dress, the fine fabric more suited to Philadelphia drawing rooms than the dusty main street of a frontier settlement. Savannah felt the curious stares of onlookers as she struggled with her luggage, her face flushing beneath her bonnet. "Allow me," a deep voice rumbled from behind. She turned to find herself face to face with a tall figure silhouetted against the sun. As her eyes adjusted, she took in the sight of a man whose very presence seemed to command the space around him. Weathered tan skin stretched over high cheekbones, and eyes the color of a summer storm gazed down at her from beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. His shoulders, broad beneath a faded blue shirt, spoke of years of hard labor. "I can manage," she said stiffly, years of caution rising to the surface, the corner of his mouth quirked upward. "I've no doubt, miss, but there's no sense in struggling when help is offered freely." He extended a calloused hand. "Yates Larson, I own the Double L Ranch just outside of town." Savannah hesitated before taking his hand briefly. "Savannah Vale, I'm new to Willow Creek." "That much is obvious," he replied, amusement warming his voice as he effortlessly picked up her trunk. "Where are you headed?" Savannah fumbled in her reticule again, this time producing a folded letter. "The Silver Star Hotel. I have arrangements to meet Mrs. Reynolds about a position." Something flickered across his face, concern, perhaps before his expression settled back into polite interest. "Agatha Reynolds is a fine woman, runs a respectable establishment." He paused. "Though I'd be remiss not to mention the Silver Star has seen better days." As they walked, Savannah took in the town, the saloon with its swinging doors, the general store with wares displayed in dusty windows, the small whitewashed church at the far end of the street. Everything appeared worn, as if the harsh desert had slowly eroded the townspeople's ambitions along with the paint on their buildings. The Silver Star Hotel stood 3 stories tall, its faded grandeur hinting at more prosperous times. The lobby was cool and dim after the brightness outside, the wooden floors polished by years of foot traffic. "Agatha," Yates called, setting down Savannah's trunk near the front desk. "You've got a visitor." A plump, gray-haired woman emerged from a back room, spectacles perched on her nose and flour dusting her apron. Her shrewd eyes took in Savannah's appearance, from her travel-worn but clearly expensive dress to her pale, anxious face. "You must be Miss Vale," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Your letter arrived last week. I've been expecting you." "Yes, madam," Savannah replied, straightening her spine. "I hope the position is still available." "It is indeed," Mrs. Reynolds confirmed, glancing at Yates with a barely perceptible nod. "Yates, be a dear and take Miss Vale's trunk up to the 3rd floor east room." She turned back to Savannah. "We can discuss the particulars over tea once you've had a chance to freshen up." Yates tipped his hat. "Happy to oblige, Agatha. Miss Vale, welcome to Willow Creek." His gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary before he hoisted her trunk once more and headed for the stairs. Mrs. Reynolds watched him go before turning back to Savannah. "I see you've already met our most eligible bachelor," she said with a knowing smile. Half the young ladies in the territory have set their caps for Yates Larson, but he's proven remarkably difficult to catch. Savannah felt a flush rising to her cheeks. I have no interest in catching anyone, Mrs. Reynolds. I'm here for work and nothing more. The older woman's eyes softened. Of course, dear. Now let me show you to your room. The east room on the third floor was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. Savannah's trunk sat at the foot of the bed, and a pitcher of water waited on the washstand. After Mrs. Reynolds departed, promising to return in half an hour, Savannah sank onto the bed, exhaustion washing over her. She had come so far physically and otherwise from the elegant Philadelphia home where she had grown up. The daughter of a wealthy merchant, she had been raised with every advantage, only to see it all collapse in the wake of her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. When her mother followed him to the grave 3 months later, Savannah had been left with nothing but debts and a desperate need to escape the pitying glances of former friends. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like providence. Respectable young woman sought for position at established hotel in Arizona territory. References required. With her last funds, she had secured passage west, pinning her hopes on a new beginning far from the whispers and scandals of Philadelphia society. Now, as she splashed water on her face and changed into a simpler dress, she wondered if she had traded one impossible situation for another. What did she know of frontier life? Of hard work and privation? She had been educated to pour tea and embroider handkerchiefs, not to scrub floors or serve rough-mannered cowboys. When Mrs. Reynolds returned, she led Savannah to a small sitting room behind the hotel's front desk. Tea was laid out on a battered but polished table, along with a plate of biscuits that made Savannah's stomach growl embarrassingly. "Eat, child," Mrs. Reynolds urged, pouring tea into delicate cups that seemed out of place in the frontier setting. "You look half-starved." Savannah didn't need to be told twice. As she ate, Mrs. Reynolds outlined her duties, helping with the cleaning of rooms, serving meals in the small dining room, assisting with laundry, and occasionally tending the front desk. The work would be hard, the hours long, but she would have room and board plus a small wage. "It's not what you're used to," Mrs. Reynolds said bluntly, having clearly deduced Savannah's background from her manner and belongings. "But it's honest work and you'll be treated with respect under my roof." "Thank you," Savannah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm willing to learn whatever is necessary." Mrs. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "You'll start tomorrow. Rest today, you look like you need it." That evening, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Savannah ventured downstairs. The hotel's small dining room was empty save for one table where Yates Larson sat with an older man whose weathered face and similar features marked him as a relative. "Miss Vale," Yates said, rising as she entered. "May I introduce my uncle, Harold Larson? Uncle Hal, this is Miss Savannah Vale, newly arrived from back east." Harold Larson's handshake was firm, his eyes kind beneath bushy brows. "Welcome to our little corner of nowhere, Miss Vale. What brings you all the way out here?" Savannah hesitated. "A desire for change, Mr. Larson, and the need for employment." "Brave girl," the older man commented. "Most Eastern ladies would sooner die than face the frontier." "Perhaps I'm not most ladies," Savannah replied, summoning a confidence she didn't entirely feel. Yates chuckled. "I suspected as much when I saw you wrestling with that trunk. Please join us for supper." Agatha's beef stew is legendary in these parts. Against her better judgment, Savannah found herself accepting. As they ate, she learned that the Double L Ranch had been founded by Yates's father 30 years earlier, when Arizona was still wild, untamed country. Hal had joined his brother after the war, and now, with the elder Larson gone, Yates ran the operation with his uncle's help. 3,000 acres, Harold said proudly. Good grazing land with water rights to Boot Creek, not the biggest spread in the territory, but solid. And growing, Yates added. We've just bought the old Peterson place to the north. The conversation flowed easily, and Savannah found herself relaxing for the first time in months. There was something refreshingly direct about these men, so different from the calculating social interactions she'd grown up with. As the evening wound down, Yates walked her to the base of the stairs. "Miss Vale," he said quietly, "Willow Creek can be a hard place for newcomers. If you need anything at all, the Double L is always open to you." Savannah met his gaze, startled by the sincerity she found there. "Thank you, Mr. Larson, that's very kind." "Not kindness," he corrected, "just neighborliness. That's how we survive out here." The next morning began Savannah's education in frontier living. Her hands, soft from years of genteel upbringing, blistered as she scrubbed floors and hauled linens. Her back ached from making beds and carrying trays. By evening she collapsed onto her narrow bed, wondering if she would ever adapt to this new life. Days turned into weeks. Gradually, Savannah's hands toughened, her arms strengthened, and she learned the rhythms of hotel work. Mrs. Reynolds proved to be a patient teacher, firm but never cruel. And the hotel guests, a mix of travelers, cowboys, and local townspeople, were generally polite, if sometimes rough around the edges. Yates Larson became a regular presence, stopping by the hotel whenever he came to town for supplies or business. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a wildflower bouquet, a book from his personal library, once a length of pretty ribbon he'd purchased from the general store. Each time he invited her to visit the ranch, an invitation she politely declined. "Why do you keep refusing him?" Mrs. Reynolds asked one evening as they sat mending linens after the dining room had closed. "Anyone with eyes can see he's sweet on you." Savannah's needle paused mid-stitch. "It wouldn't be proper," Mrs. Reynolds snorted. "Proper? Child, this isn't Philadelphia. Out here, a woman visiting a respectable ranch in broad daylight is hardly cause for scandal." She set down her own mending, fixing Savannah with a penetrating look. "What are you running from, girl?" Savannah's hands trembled. "I'm not running from anything, I simply needed a fresh start." The older woman hummed skeptically. "Well, whatever ghosts are chasing you, they won't find you at the Double L, and that boy could use some happiness in his life." "What do you mean?" Savannah asked despite herself. Mrs. Reynolds sighed. "Yates was engaged once, about 5 years back. Pretty local girl named Emily Carson. They were to be married in the spring, but that winter brought a terrible influenza outbreak. Emily was one of the first to go." She shook her head sadly. "He threw himself into the ranch after that, worked himself half to death. This is the first time since then I've seen him show interest in a woman." Savannah didn't know how to respond. The idea that someone like Yates, strong, confident, seemingly untouchable, could have experienced such loss made him suddenly more human, more vulnerable. The next time he came to the hotel, she found herself studying him more closely, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and pain, the way his smile sometimes didn't quite reach his eyes. When he extended his usual invitation to visit the ranch, she surprised both of them by accepting. "Sunday afternoon would be best," she said. "Mrs. Reynolds has given me a few hours off." The surprise on his face quickly gave way to genuine pleasure. "I'll come for you at noon," he promised. "Wear something you don't mind getting dusty." Sunday dawned clear and hot, the June sun already fierce by mid-morning. Savannah dressed in her plainest skirt and shirtwaist, her hair braided and pinned securely beneath a wide-brimmed hat she'd purchased from the general store. When Yates arrived with a wagon rather than his usual horse, she was waiting on the hotel's front porch. "Right on time," he commented, helping her up to the seat beside him. "I'm impressed. Punctuality is a virtue, Mr. Larson," she replied primly, though a smile tugged at her lips. "So it is, Miss Vale, so it is." He clicked to the horses, and they set off down the dusty road leading out of town. The landscape opened up before them, the town quickly giving way to vast expanses of scrubland dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of juniper. Mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged profiles sharp against the brilliant blue sky. Savannah had never seen such space, such emptiness that somehow didn't feel empty at all. "It's beautiful," she breathed, taking in the sweeping vistas. Yates glanced at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. Most Easterners don't see it that way, they call it desolate, barren. They're not looking properly, Savannah said with conviction. There's life everywhere different from back east, but no less vibrant. His smile widened. Exactly so, Miss Vale. Exactly so. The Double L Ranch came into view after about an hour's drive, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a shallow valley where a creek cut through the landscape, nurturing a ribbon of green along its banks. The main house was solid rather than grand, built of local stone and timber with a wide porch wrapping around two sides. Outbuildings, corrals, and barns surrounded it, and in the distance, Savannah could see cattle grazing on the hillsides. "Welcome to the Double L," Yates said, a note of pride in his voice as he pulled the wagon to a halt before the house. Uncle Hal emerged from the main house, followed by a plump, gray-haired woman who was introduced as Mrs. Donnelly, the housekeeper who had been keeping Larson men fed and out of trouble for 20 years. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, with sturdy furniture, braided rugs, and shelves lined with books, more books than Savannah had expected to find in a frontier home. After a hearty meal that put Mrs. Reynolds's cooking to shame, Yates suggested a ride to see some of the property. Savannah hesitated. "I haven't ridden in years," she admitted. "Not since I was a girl." "Don't worry," he assured her. "Old Pepper is the gentlest mare in the territory. She practically puts her riders to sleep." True to his word, the dappled gray mare he saddled for her was docile and responsive, and soon they were riding at a leisurely pace along the creek, Yates pointing out features of the landscape and telling stories of the ranch's early days. "My father came here with nothing but a dream and a stubborn refusal to fail," he said, guiding his stallion around a rocky outcropping. "The first winters nearly broke him, but he held on, built up the herd cow by cow, acre by acre." "You must be very proud of what he accomplished," Savannah observed. Yates nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I am, though sometimes I wonder if I'm worthy of it, if I can build on what he started the way he would have wanted." "From what I've seen and heard in town, you've already done that," Savannah said. "People respect you, Mr. Larson." "Yates," he corrected gently. "Out here away from town, I think we can dispense with such formalities, don't you?" Savannah hesitated, then nodded. "Yates," she said, testing the name on her tongue. "And you must call me Savannah." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of leather, the soft thud of hooves on packed earth, and the whisper of the breeze through the scrub grass. Eventually, they came to a rise overlooking the valley, where Yates suggested they rest. Sitting on a sun-warmed rock, Savannah surveyed the panoramic view, the ranch buildings below, the cattle dotting the hillsides, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. It was a hard land, yes, but there was a stark beauty to it that stirred something deep within her. "Why did you really come west, Savannah?" Yates asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She stiffened. "I told you, for work." "A woman with your education and background could have found work in any eastern city," he observed. "You didn't need to come all the way to Arizona territory just to clean hotel rooms." Savannah stared down at her hands, calloused now from months of labor. "Perhaps I wanted to be somewhere no one knew me. Running from something then," she looked up sharply. "Why does everyone assume I'm running?" His expression was gentle, understanding rather than judgmental. "Because most of us out here are, in one way or another. The West is where people come to reinvent themselves, to escape whatever ghosts haunt them back east." The understanding in his eyes broke something loose inside her. Before she could stop herself, the story came pouring out: her father's financial collapse after trusting the wrong business partner, the scandal that followed, his suicide, her mother's decline and death, the creditors who stripped away everything, even the marriage proposal hastily withdrawn when her suitor realized there would be no dowry. "I couldn't bear to stay," she finished, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Not with everyone whispering, pitying me, or worse, blaming me somehow as if I should have prevented it all. Yates listened without interruption, his face grave. When she fell silent, he reached out slowly and took her hand in his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Thank you for trusting me with your story," he said simply. "It can't have been easy to relive it." Savannah looked down at their joined hands. "I haven't told anyone. Not even Mrs. Reynolds knows the details. Your secret is safe with me," he promised. "But Savannah, you should know that out here people care more about who you are now than who you were before. Your father's mistakes don't define you." "Don't they?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I feel as though I don't belong anywhere anymore. Not in the world I came from, and not here either." Yates's fingers tightened around hers. "You belong wherever you choose to put down roots, and there are plenty of people in Willow Creek who would be glad to have you stay." The ride back to the ranch was quieter, both of them lost in thought. As they approached the main house, Savannah was struck by how comfortable she felt in this place, how right it seemed to be riding beside this quiet, thoughtful man. The weeks that followed saw a shift in their relationship. Yates began calling at the hotel more frequently, sometimes just for a few minutes of conversation when Savannah could be spared from her duties. On her half-day off each week, he took her riding or driving, showing her the countryside around Willow Creek. Once, they attended a barn raising together, where Savannah was introduced to neighboring ranchers and their families. July brought scorching heat, and the town's Independence Day celebration. The entire population of Willow Creek and the surrounding ranches gathered for a picnic, races, and dancing. Savannah, wearing her best dress now altered to better suit frontier life, found herself in demand as a dance partner, but it was Yates who claimed most of her attention. As they whirled around the makeshift dance floor to the lively tunes of fiddle and accordion, Savannah realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with this quiet, strong man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. The realization terrified her. Her experience with love had been brief and painful, ending in rejection when her circumstances changed. How could she trust that Yates's interest wouldn't similarly cool once the novelty of her Eastern background wore off? And how could she bear it if he learned the full truth of her family's disgrace? That night, unable to sleep in the stifling heat of her attic room, Savannah slipped downstairs and out onto the hotel's back porch, seeking relief in the marginally cooler night air. She was surprised to find Yates already there, leaning against the railing, his face turned up to the star-filled sky. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked without turning, somehow knowing it was her. "It's too hot," she said, moving to stand beside him, "and my mind won't quiet." He glanced at her, his eyes silver in the moonlight. "What thoughts are keeping you awake?" Savannah hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I've been thinking about belonging, about finding one's place in the world. And have you come to any conclusions?" she sighed, leaning against the railing. "Only that it's harder than it looks. Just when I think I might be finding my footing here, I remember how different my life was, how unprepared I am for this existence." Yates was quiet for a long moment. "Do you miss it? Your old life?" "Parts of it," she admitted. "I miss the security of knowing my place, of understanding the rules. Here, everything feels uncertain." "Life is always uncertain," he said softly. "We just pretend otherwise until something happens to remind us of the truth." Savannah thought of Emily, the fiancée he had lost, and wondered if that was the reminder he had received. "I suppose you're right," she murmured. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. After a while, Yates spoke again, his voice low and earnest. "Savannah, I've been meaning to ask. That is, I was wondering if you might consider." He broke off, uncharacteristically hesitant. Her heart began to pound. "Yes." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the dim light. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying me to the harvest dance next month? As my official escort." The harvest dance was the biggest social event of the year in Willow Creek, even more significant than the Independence Day celebration. To attend as someone's official escort was tantamount to a public declaration of courtship. Savannah's first instinct was to refuse, to protect herself from the vulnerability of hope. But looking into Yates's eyes, seeing the mixture of uncertainty and determination there, she found she couldn't deny either of them this chance. "I would be honored," she said softly. His smile was like the dawn breaking. "You've made me very happy, Savannah Vale." In the weeks leading up to the harvest dance, Savannah found herself caught up in unexpected preparations. Mrs. Reynolds insisted on helping her remake her best dress, adding touches of lace saved from her own wedding gown. The other hotel employees teased her good-naturedly about catching the most eligible bachelor in the territory. Even the townspeople seemed to approve, nodding and smiling when they saw her with Yates. Only Savannah herself remained conflicted. As her feelings for Yates deepened, so too did her fear of eventual rejection. She had told him much of her story, but not the worst parts, not the details of her father's disgrace that would surely taint her in his eyes. The night before the dance, she confessed her fears to Mrs. Reynolds as they sat by the kitchen fire drinking tea. "I can't go through with it," she said miserably. "I've been deceiving him, deceiving everyone." Mrs. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Savannah took a deep breath. "My father didn't just make bad investments. He embezzled from his partners. When it was discovered, he killed himself rather than face prison." She couldn't meet the older woman's eyes. "I'm the daughter of a thief and a coward." To her surprise, Mrs. Reynolds merely sighed. "Child, do you think you're the only one with darkness in your past? This territory is full of people who came here to escape something. The question is not what your father did, but what you will do." "But what if Yates? That boy has been looking at you like you hung the moon since the day you arrived," Mrs. Reynolds interrupted. "Give him some credit for knowing his own mind." The harvest dance was held in the town's largest barn, decorated with autumn leaves, corn shocks, and paper lanterns that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. Savannah, wearing her remade dress with Mrs. Reynolds's lace trim, felt a mixture of excitement and dread as Yates escorted her inside. He looked magnificent in his best suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion, his eyes bright with pleasure as he introduced her proudly to those she hadn't yet met. As they danced, Savannah tried to lose herself in the moment, to forget her fears and simply enjoy being in his arms. But as the evening wore on, the weight of her secret became too heavy to bear. During a break between dances, she asked Yates to walk outside with her, needing fresh air and privacy for what she had to say. The night was cool, stars brilliant overhead, the sounds of music and laughter from the barn creating a backdrop to their conversation. They walked a little way from the building, to a spot beneath an old oak tree where a rough bench had been placed. "Yates," Savannah began, her voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you long ago." He took her hands in his expression concerned. "You can tell me anything, Savannah, anything at all." Taking a deep breath, she told him the full story of her father's crimes, the embezzlement, the falsified accounts, the investors who lost everything because they trusted him. She told him about the scandal that followed, how former friends crossed the street to avoid her, how her mother died as much from shame as from illness. "I understand if this changes things between us," she finished, staring down at their joined hands. "I wouldn't blame you for wanting nothing more to do with me." Yates was silent for a long moment, and Savannah's heart sank. This was it, then the end of whatever might have been between them. "Look at me," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm. Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his face, expecting to see disgust or disappointment. Instead, she found only tenderness and a deep, unwavering regard that took her breath away. "Savannah Vale," he said quietly, "do you really think I care about what your father did?" "I care about you, your courage, your kindness, your determination to build a new life. Nothing your father did or didn't do changes who you are." Tears welled in her eyes. "But people will talk when they find out, they always do." "Let them talk," Yates said with a shrug. This is the frontier, Savannah. Most folks are too busy trying to survive to worry about someone else's past. He squeezed her hands. Besides, you're not alone anymore. You have me if you want me. Savannah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. If I want you. Yates nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. I was planning to wait a bit longer, do this properly with a ring and all, but he took a deep breath. I love you, Savannah Vale. I think I've loved you since that first day when you were too stubborn to let me help with your trunk. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. The tears spilled over now, running unchecked down her cheeks. But I don't belong here, she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. I don't know how to be a rancher's wife, how to live this life. Yates reached up to gently wipe away her tears. She whispered, I don't belong, he said softly, echoing her words. Then, with a smile that outshone the stars, he added, the cowboy answered, you belong beside me. And then he was kissing her, his lips warm and sure against hers, his arms strong around her waist, and Savannah was kissing him back, pouring 4 months of longing and fear and hope into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. Say you'll marry me, he murmured. Say you'll make the Double L your home. Savannah's heart felt too full for her chest, joy bubbling up inside her like a spring. Yes, she whispered. Yes to both. They returned to the dance hand in hand, and when Yates proudly announced their engagement to the assembled townspeople, the cheer that went up was deafening. Mrs. Reynolds wept openly, declaring she'd known all along they were meant for each other. Uncle Hal clapped his nephew on the back so hard Yates nearly stumbled, then surprised Savannah by embracing her with equal enthusiasm. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations, dancing, and stolen kisses. By the time Yates escorted her back to the hotel, dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. I'll come by later today, he promised, reluctant to leave her even for a few hours. We can start making plans. Savannah nodded, too happy for words. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun, she marveled at how completely her life had changed in just a few short months. From the depths of despair in Philadelphia to the heights of joy in Willow Creek, it was more than she could have imagined. Yates and Savannah were married 2 weeks later in the little white church at the end of Main Street. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, the women bringing food for the celebration afterward, the men contributing whiskey and music. Savannah wore Mrs. Reynolds's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame with a crown of autumn wildflowers in her hair. As they exchanged vows before the smiling minister, Savannah looked into Yates's eyes and saw her future reflected there, a future of hard work and simple joys, of children and grandchildren, of a love that would weather whatever storms might come. Later, as they drove toward the Double L in a wagon festooned with ribbons and flowers by the town's children, Savannah leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in a way she had never believed possible. Happy? Yates asked, smiling down at her. More than I can say, she replied honestly. I never thought I'd find a place where I truly belonged. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. You belong with me, Savannah Larson, always have from the moment you stepped off that stagecoach. And as the Double L came into view, bathed in the golden light of sunset, Savannah knew he was right. She had found her place in the world not in the drawing rooms of Philadelphia or even in the dusty streets of Willow Creek, but here, beside this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and loved her anyway. The future stretched before them, as vast and promising as the western sky, and for the first time in her life, Savannah wasn't afraid to embrace it.